Hello, everyone. This is Barbara Coleman-Foster, and for this brief video, I'm going to share the development of a code book as well as inputting information into SPSS. So for this project, we're using information from our textbook, Your Statistical Consultant, specifically the three questions that we were instructed to use in Module 0. And so for that, I created a code book first in Excel. And you can see that here, because we are learning about coding, creating code books, and inputting information into SPSS, I did take some liberties and decided to use, for example, variable names and descriptions that were a little different from what was presented in the book. So for my code book, I did follow the book's example of including the question number, variable name, the variable description or label. I also included level of measurement and then the value codes and labels that go along with them. And so as you can see, for my variable names, I intentionally used, excuse me, variable names that were a little more descriptive. So, for example, in regards to working mothers and their relationship with their child, I use WM for working mother and then REL child for that relationship. And so all of the question 3A through 3D, those variable names all start with WM for working mothers since those were related to that particular question. And then for the question about life satisfaction, I use LifeSat and then an underscore followed by the particular category, or I should say area. So area where in this case, area is in response to, or rather, a reflection of where they live, the city or place. And then we have ACT for activities, FAM for family, and then we have friendship and health. So this is the code book that I created in Excel. And although it wasn't a requirement, I did find that it was very helpful when I moved on to SPSS. So moving on to SPSS, for those variables, go into the variable view. For those variables, the nice thing about using the code book is that I was able to copy and paste the variables, didn't have to type all of them. So that was there. And of course, once you enter the variable, then SPSS automatically populates across these various columns for the type as well as the width, and then the number of decimals you want, the label, values, missing values, columns, the alignment, measure, and then the role. So for each of the variables for the questions that were in Module 0, I have those variable names as well as the width of the numerical data and then the number of decimals. The only one I assigned decimals was for the number of hours watching TV. I know one of my responses included a decimal, and so I wanted to be sure to include that as well. And then for the labels, that followed the code book that I created in Excel as well. Again, that I was able to copy and paste those as opposed to having to retype everything. And then for the values, of course, inputting each of those, I recognized initially I was inputting, let's go to one of these questions here. Initially, I was inputting a value for the missing value, and then I realized that was a whole column. And so I didn't need to do that one. So the values here, I did include a don't know for most, but the values there include that column. So I didn't need to include that since it was already there. And then excuse me again, I realized that the columns here has to do with the width of the columns for the variable. So when we go to data view, I like it to be clean. And so instead of having a lot of overlapping, I was able to extend the widths of those columns so that it could fit those variable names. Again, I know I chose variable names or created variable names that were a little lengthy in comparison to what they were originally, but it works for me. So that um, variable view allowed me to input all of the variables along with their respective values. And then, of course, for, not of course, but rather for gender, I created values male, female, non-binary, even though there weren't any responses in our spreadsheet related to non-binary, and then other. And then you'll notice that for the don't know, I put a 98, and for the missing value, I use 99. And the reason for those higher values, 98 and 99, is in reality, if someone wanted to indicate a gender other than what we would consider the traditional, and I would consider non-binary to be amongst the traditional responses, then it could get rather extensive as people can potentially be rather creative with that. So I left it open at least until the double digits. From there, the data view, I went to our spreadsheet and cleaned that up a little. So for the spreadsheet, I downloaded or created my own copy of the spreadsheet, and then I cleaned up some of the data values in places where, and even I did this, where folks input female or male. I used the code either 0 or 1 appropriately for that. So you'll see that that's happening throughout the data. There are quite a few data points here. I did clean up the numbers along the sides because some of those were missing. I imagine what happened is as we were all inputting data into the spreadsheet, some rows got missed and some rows probably got messed up and people started deleting. So that threw the numbering off. And then I just cleaned that up as well. And then ensured that all of the data was coded and that all of the columns aligned with the columns in my SPSS data view or variable view, because my intention is not to input the 340 um, entries, but rather, and I'm sorry, the 340 cases, but rather to copy and paste into the SPSS sheet or SPSS form so that all of those data points must align in order to do that properly. And so just to give an example of that, going back to the data, the green line is essentially a marker so I know for myself the last group that I copied to. And so essentially what I did before was copy about 10 rows at a time. So I'm going to take 12 through 21 here and all the way across to that last data point and copy that data from the Excel spreadsheet. And then because these align with the data view in SPSS, I should be able to take those 10 cases all all the way through that last data point and just paste that information. Now, I'm sure I could do more than 10 at a time, but at least I know I don't have to input 340 times what about 10 um, variables or so, and that hopefully will save some time. I know the next stop is to run some analysis on this data, and I look forward to doing that and seeing what SPSS gives us as a result. Thanks.